On a quiet spring afternoon, a young girl's laughter filled the air until two strangers arrived with fake badges and dark intentions. What they didn't expect was her grandfather, a retired federal agent, stepping forward to expose a lie that would unravel the entire neighborhood. This is the true story of how one man turned fear into justice and woke up a sleeping community. It was a warm spring afternoon in Rosevale Lane, the kind of day where time seemed to slow. The air was thick with the scent of lilacs and fresh-cut grass. Lucy, 10 years old and joyfully carefree, was twirling barefoot in her grandmother's front yard. Her laugh mixed with the breeze, rising above the soft hum of suburban peace. The white picket fence framed the yard like a postcard. Her grandmother was inside baking, humming something old and sweet. Lucy didn't notice the black sedan that pulled up at the curb. She didn't see the two men in dark suits step out, straighten their fake ties, or flash imitation badges as they approached the house. They looked official, but there was something off, too polished, too rigid. "We're with the HOA," one of them said when Lucy glanced up. She blinked. "My grandma's inside." The taller man crouched, smiling too wide. "Do you have permission to play here?" "Young lady," before she could answer, he grabbed her wrist, not harshly, not violently, but wrong. A stranger's hand. A violation. Lucy froze. Inside the house, a curtain shifted. Franklin Harris had seen enough. At 72, he had the quiet energy of a man who had lived two lives, one as a devoted grandfather, the other as a former IRS field agent who once unraveled multi-million-dollar fraud cases with a voice calm enough to crack stone. He had spent decades dissecting deception, and he could smell it the moment these men stepped onto his daughter's porch. He stepped out, slow but firm, wearing worn slippers and a pressed shirt. His voice was even. "Let go of my granddaughter." The men hesitated. "We're here on official HOA business," one said. Franklin tilted his head. "Then you know your limits. This is private property, and you just put hands on a child." "She was unsupervised. We're allowed to—" "You're allowed to leave," Franklin interrupted. "Now." The men stood there a second too long. That's when Franklin reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. Not to show ID, but to reveal the folded leather case of a federal retiree. It still had weight. "I spent 30 years auditing people like you," he said. "I know a fake badge when I see one, and I know a predator when I hear one lie." Something shifted. The performance dropped. The men exchanged a glance. Then they turned to go, but Franklin wasn't finished. He handed Lucy to her grandmother, who had rushed out in time to see the tail end of it. His daughter was calling the police. That was good. But Franklin wanted more than charges. He wanted truth, and he wanted witnesses, so he followed them, down the block, calmly, deliberately. "Let's visit the HOA together," he said, loud enough for neighbors to hear as he walked behind them. The men laughed it off, but people were listening. Doors opened. Phones recorded. The neighborhood, so long lulled into routine, was beginning to stir. The HOA building wasn't far, a community center on Willow Drive, where every Tuesday they held open meetings that no one ever attended. Until today. Franklin and the two imposters entered as the board was settling in. Faces turned. Confused whispers rose, but Franklin's voice cut through it all. "These men are not from your office. They just threatened my granddaughter on our own property. I want them identified, questioned, and I want this board to explain how they got badges." The room froze. One board member stood. Another fumbled with his tablet. One of the imposters tried to leave, but Franklin stepped in his path. "No one leaves," he said. "This isn't just about Lucy. It's about trust. And I'm about to burn every last inch of fake authority out of this room." What followed was not a speech, but a slow, clinical dismantling. Franklin asked for names, for credentials, for digital records. He requested security footage, badge issuance logs, anything proving who these men were. The HOA had none. Under pressure, one member confessed the men were hired off books to intimidate a resident over non-compliant yard activity. The child was never supposed to be involved. It was supposed to be a scare tactic. They underestimated who lived in that home. Phones recorded everything. By the time police arrived, the community had heard the full story. The footage went viral, not because of the confrontation, but because of Franklin's closing words: "You don't get to invent authority to silence families. And you don't put your hands on my granddaughter, ever." The men were arrested. The board faced investigation. Civil suits followed. But the most powerful shift wasn't legal. It was cultural. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves began to gather. They talked about rights, boundaries, and the slow creep of unchecked power. Franklin became a reluctant leader. He hosted monthly town hall meetings, voluntary, open, inclusive. They reviewed policies together. They rewrote outdated HOA rules. Transparency became more than a word. Lucy, she never lost her joy, but she gained something deeper: awareness. She would sometimes sit on the porch, twirling a blade of grass between her fingers, looking up at her grandfather like he had caught the sun for her. "You're kind of scary when you're mad," she told him once. He smiled. "I'm scary when I'm quiet." And he was. Not because he shouted, but because he saw through the lies. Because he knew that sometimes evil doesn't kick down your door. Sometimes it rings the bell with a fake badge and a forced smile. And when it does, someone has to open that door, not in fear, but in truth. Franklin opened it, and behind him, a neighborhood followed.